Some believe the saying, let go and let God. It teaches a passive submission to God. Paul, however, uses a word that is not passive, but is active. Philippians 3:14 states, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. The word press is dioko, which means chase, pursue eagerly, or to try to obtain. It is present tense, showing that it is ongoing. 1 Corinthians 9:24-27 reinforces it by saying, So run that ye may obtain, and every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Paul doesn't say, sit back and watch, nor does he say, try it out, and if you don't like it, stop. He says to strive, to run, to obtain. In Corinth, there was a game called the Isthmian Games that was held. The Isthmian Games were a festival of athletes and musical competition in honor to Poseidon. It was held every other year of each Olympiad. Some say that it was the second and the fourth year, some that it was the first and the third. According to Dio, a contemporary of Paul, the basic athletic events of the Isthmian Games included foot races, wrestling, jumping, boxing, hurling the javelin, throwing the discus. At one time or another in the history of the games, additional events included horse racing, chariot races, poetry reading, drama, singing, heralding, playing the lyre and the flute, and a painting competition. When I looked up the qualifications to enter, contestants had to prove rigorous training for 10 months, spending the 11th month training in Corinth, where they were supervised every day. In each of the Panhellenic Games, a wreath was then bestowed to the winner made of a material to represent the god of that city. In this case, for Poseidon, it was a pine wreath. There were 5 crowns that were mentioned for the Christian to strive for. The first is the incorruptible crown for self-discipline, which we'll see in 1 Corinthians 9:24-27. The second is a crown of rejoicing in 1 Thessalonians 2:19. In Thessalonians, though, the crown is a little vague, but the counterpart for it will be in Romans 1:8-15. It is for the faithfulness in our witness. The third is a crown of righteousness, which will be found in 2 Timothy 4:8. And who is this for? It's for those who look for his coming. The fourth will be in 1 Peter 5:4, though verses 1-4 will be used for context, and it is for leading the flocks. The last is in James 1:12 for enduring temptation, as the KJV puts it. The Greek, however, is not just temptation, but an internal temptation to sin. We've sometimes been told, the devil made me do it, but that is not always the case. Sometimes it's just your own habits. It is a crown given for fighting against those temptations. For all we know, the crowns may just be mentioned for honor and acknowledgement. The picture here, either way, it does not show passiveness. It shows an activeness. So the question becomes, which crowns will you strive for? The first crown, 1 Corinthians 9:25, and every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it for a corruptible crown, or the word Staphanos, but we an incorruptible. The word for temperate here is ingratuitai. It can be translated as self-control, temperate, or self-defense, or self-discipline. It does not mean to have self-control in the future. It does not mean, I did well in the past, so I can let myself slip this time. It means every moment in the now. It is used in this manner only here in the New Testament. There is one other use where it's for a form of abstinence, but in this particular time, Paul does clarify in all things. Be temperate in all things. While we who are saved are not subject to punishment under the law because of God's salvation through the sacrifice of Jesus, we are told to follow God. In fact, in Romans 13:1-5, Paul writes, Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and you shall have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore ye needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. Even though we are saved and have been forgiven, we are not only held subject for sin, we are also held for conscience sake. Luke uses this word when he writes of Paul in Acts 24:16. In this also I myself exercise, without offense, a conscience to have toward God and man, continually in everything. That's the literal word-for-word translation from Greek. Paul does not mention exercising off and on, but here he says continually in everything. So looking at 1 Corinthians 9:25, Acts 24:16, and Romans 13:1-5, we have a larger picture. It is a continuous self-control so that we have a good standing not only toward God, who will judge us for good things, but men who will judge God through our actions. May we run our race that others may judge God as someone they will want in their lives.